So, welcome again to Sabil Kumi week, a Kumi session, a family gathering of people who care about justice and peace and are active um, on the situation in Palestine and Israel. Thank you very much for your continuous commitment, and thank you for being with us today. Today was actually a bit cold day. We had hail in Jerusalem and in some parts of the West Bank. It's not very cold, but it's just like having like hail and at the moment. So the streets were slippery and there were like some, I wouldn't say flooding, but there was a lot of water on the streets. Today is like my second day at Sabil because I've been part with other colleagues at Sabil. We've been busy with hosting the second delegation since the war has started. And actually, some groups are coming back to Palestine, Israel. The first delegation was the famous South African friends, who many of them church leaders who came and they said, we want to spend Christmas in Palestine, in Bethlehem. Actually, they had the intention to go to Jordan, to Gaza, but sadly, this did not materialize. There was one participant in the delegation that got very excited and she said we should have my church come. And actually, she led a group from the Presbyterian Church, main America, but there were some guests, ecumenical guests from the US. There was an Orthodox, a Catholic, Methodist, and a Mennonite also, I believe, and then non-denominational person who said we're going to come and join, and then Anglican too. Sorry if I've just repeated the Anglican again. So we've been touring Jerusalem, the Holy Land. They arrived through Jordan because the only flight that is taking place is actually from Zil Al. So people who wanted to come to the Holy Land and want to avoid using Al Al, they came through Jordan. And they arrived there, most of them a day earlier, and they flew from Jordan. They went through Jordan over the bridge to Jerusalem. So there were 3 days in Jerusalem, 3 days in Bethlehem area, 2 days in Ramallah, and 1 day to Nablus. So it was a journey. And actually, we have some of the guests who were part of the delegation here in the meeting. And we said, on the way back to Nablus, we had actually encountered the checkpoint. We knew that the checkpoint existed, but the group spent few hours at the checkpoint. And it wasn't fun. I know many of you over here have spent time, sadly, at checkpoints through different trips. So the checkpoints now, checkpoints are military blocks that restrict the movement for Palestinians. So some of these checkpoints are very close to the Green Line. So they are more like border crossing, but the majority of them are actually internal of the West Bank, either surrounding East Jerusalem or even dividing cities from villages, or one village from another village, or Palestinian neighborhoods from other neighborhoods in the same within the same area. So checkpoints are a combination of different move restrictions. Some of them are fixed and not manned, as Israel uses this terminology. It means that they've completely blocked the road and by cement, by metal barriers, and nobody can cross. And there aren't soldiers protecting or defending this or making sure that that the roadblocks are maintained. So they are unmanned checkpoints. There might be some cameras here and there, or military jeeps that come and pass by occasionally to make sure that they are still in order. Others are fixed and manned, so they are permanent checkpoints and they're 24/7 staffed. Other checkpoints are they have a semi military presence, so that means that the soldiers come only for a few hours a day, Usually these hours are very scheduled, and they are mainly for checkpoints or roadblocks that restrict movement around Palestinian villages or smaller towns. So it's not very easy for people to move from one community, even farmers, to access their land. So there is a checkpoint. Um, they claim for security. It doesn't make any logic, because it's why do you need a military checkpoint to stop or to check Palestinian farmers going to pick olives or to plant olive trees or just to be present in their fields. And there are plenty of checkpoints that are flying checkpoints. That means that it's a military jeep stops at a moment at a certain time of the day, and just it could be for few minutes and it could last for the entire day. They stop and they create um, um, a military presence, and they usually look into people's IDs, or they create human-made traffic, making it very difficult for people to cross. Part of it is very psychological. They need to remind the people that they are under occupation, that we are here, we are present, we are powerful, and we have control. So that is very much frustrating for many people, especially for people who have to go to work, people who have to go to school, people who have to go to a medical appointment, people who have to, just like want to go for a ride. Having a military checkpoint very close by to you doesn't make that even the option to go for a ride just to listen to music or meet a friend becomes a serious issue. Um, we've asked Marietta, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. So welcome back to the US, to the empire. Did it change by the time that you've been away? Did the US change?
No, I think I've only been here a few hours, but I think it's still the same as far as I can tell, unfortunately.
They did not repent yet?
Not yet.
Yeah, but because I believe like few of the delegation left earlier, so they had something to do, but I don't see that they've been really busy opening the eyes of Empire. So I hope it was a safe flight back home.
Yeah, after finally making it past the closed checkpoint, that as you're talking, that was an issue on the way to the airport as well, having to wait in line to get through past Jericho towards the bridge. Just sitting in line for quite a while, just waiting for it to open for no security reason, just waiting.
Yeah, Marietta stayed for a few days later after the delegation. She went to Bethlehem, Beit Sahur, on a secret mission, very suspicious. She did not tell us what she was doing. Yeah, she is. But I mean, but we know that she was doing something good. But actually, the road that you took, I should have mentioned this. I don't know if your guide or your friends told you, is actually the same road that the wise men took when they would head back to east, trying to flee Herod. So that is exactly the same road on the same path that you were going. There's a small monastery there on your left. It's where, according to tradition, the wise men slept the last night in Bethlehem as they were fleeing from Herod. There's a small cave, a church, a beautiful church built on top of it. Not many people go there. It's not like the main attraction of tourists, but it's a place. If you are in Jerusalem or in Palestine, Bethlehem, and you'd like to do something that not most people have done, that's a place for you to go. So, could you like what made you come on? So we're speaking about checkpoints, but before I'd like you just to give a witness about, it's about fresh eyes that have been in Palestine, and what did you see
You want checkpoint related or in general?
in general?
In general. Yeah. So I've been to Palestine quite a few times before and have seen things progressively I would say, get worse over the years, get these security, I use air quotes there, systems become physically more entrenched. And I think that was one of the, I guess at this point, I'm not surprised by it, but there are still things that just kind of hit you in the face with a fresh awakening of how intense the occupation is. The checkpoints are a good example. I mean, the one evening that our group was stopped in line, almost 3 hours total. A few of us walked up to see what the quote unquote security protocol was at the time, and there was none. It's, I think, what you all have been hearing, that in previous years you could watch at a checkpoint people having their IDs checked or searched, or having to take their luggage out and send it through another metal detector. I've had to do that with a busload of people before. It's all pretty arbitrary, but it's at least a pretend. It's a security theater. It's a performance. And now there's not even a performance. We were just stopped for no other reason than to reduce traffic on roads for the settlers and make it more convenient for the settlers. Another form of just erasure that there are any other people there. And it's even less of a moment for them to be confronted with the fact that they're occupying another people's land and that there are other people that live there. All of the things that they have used to explain these behaviors and this security infrastructure to international audience are just completely fictional now. I think we all know that there's always been an element of farce to that, but just becomes increasingly obvious. As we were sharing on the ride to the airport, again, there was no reason for us to be stopped at a checkpoint. Traffic was backed up all the way through the valley, and folks trying to find faster ways to get around, knowing that there aren't any, and that there's no other options. I mean, thank God I was just trying to get across the border, but if I had any kind of actual need to be anywhere, if I'd had a medical emergency, if I was trying to get to, I have elderly parents, I think about that. If I was separated from them and they needed help with something.
You had a flight, you were traveling, you had a flight, so it's not also.
I did, but I guess, yeah, that's fair to say too, that traveling in and out of Jordan, because there were so many fewer flights out of Tel Aviv, the travel time, I live in Charleston, West Virginia, and there are not a ton of flights in and out of here either. So travel is a bit limited. The total travel time on the way there and on the way back took me almost 3 days by the time all was said and done. And I usually fly in and out of Tel Aviv when I can, and that's almost a day and a half total time that I missed being able to spend time in Palestine, being able to see more things, see other friends, and all of that was taken up because of the having to leave enough time, extra time, not knowing if the checkpoint was going to open at 9 like they said it was, or if we're just going to be sitting there for hours. And then how far back in line am I by the time that checkpoint opens? It took well over 6 hours to get from the apartment I was staying at in Bethlehem to across to Jordan. And so some of that was just the logistics of it, but it's ridiculous that it takes that long and that it's that uncertain. I came out fairly unscathed from that, and I know it could have taken a lot longer. And it's just increasingly infuriating that Israel can still use this and the international community will still buy these security protocols as having any kind of legitimacy for any sort of security, because that's just absolutely not the case. It's apartheid, it's separation by intention, and a killing through inconvenience, really, as applies to other parts of the occupation as well. But knowing how close things are there, especially just trying to get from one part of the West Bank to the other, inside the West Bank, and knowing that those security checkpoints are set up all the time, but the ones that can be set up at any moment to completely disconnect whole cities in the West Bank from each other, is I don't know. I'm kind of losing my English words on the side of things. I don't have the words in English to describe how ridiculous it is at this point. And none of this was completely new to me, but I've reached another level of a furiousness with the absurdity of it all.
It's very clear. I mean, it's, as you mentioned, many years ago, they used to put a lot of investment to show that this is actually, that there's a there's a security reason, or there's a logic for security, that we have to go through it. So it's yes, nobody likes doing it, but there's a purpose. But I mean, it's as you've mentioned, it's lately, nobody's even investing in doing the act. Nobody cares about creating a logic. It's either they use it as a punishment, just because people just out of hate. The army, everybody's angry in Palestine, Israel, but it's very clear that Israel is looking in every possible way to punish the local Palestinians, of course, under occupation. And also, it's a very productive method to make the lives, to ruin the economical cycle of the society, to disrupt. Most schools and universities are just using Zoom or online sessions. So it's having a very big impact on all of the transportation industry in Palestine. And it's a very powerful, and it works, this technique, to put people, to force people, but to have people under control.
We got a question from Anne in the comments. Do you want me to continue, Omar, sharing some more?
Yes, please. Please. But I wanted to ask you, some people asked you, there was a question first. How, how easy, I know it is more time consuming, you've mentioned it. How easy is it to travel from Jordan, from Amman, and would you recommend it for other trips?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I don't know. I would recommend it. I guess I would recommend whatever is logistically makes more sense from where you're traveling in the US. I'm not sure that it makes very much difference. Well, I guess I will say if as we leave these trips, we're concerned about what we're carrying, things that may uh, uh, clue Israeli security to ask us more questions. There was almost no Israeli security leaving the West Bank and going into Jordan. I went up to the counter where you present your documents because I wasn't clear on where it was I needed to pay the fee to travel first, because I was traveling by myself. And he was super friendly, just gave me directions and did all my stuff. The only question he asked me was how to pronounce my name, which was a question they'd ask in Jordan as well multiple times. I've had Israelis usually ask that. I don't know why it sticks out, but that was literally the only question. There was no bag searching. There was no security. There was absolutely nothing. Jordan had security like a country would. I think you should expect going in and out of the airport. They ask some questions and things, but all reasonable things to ask what you were doing there and why you were traveling through there. So but it was time consuming. I mean, that'll be part of the story that I tell on this trip and that I've already had to tell to my church. I had to change to fly into Amman, change my flights and timing for here. I had to leave work sooner, have more events at work here covered. I'm a pastor, so I couldn't be at some things as Ash Wednesday began, so that I could arrive to the delegation on time. So I think, depending on what your travel concerns are, it's 6 one, half a dozen the other, to Amman and Tel Aviv, in my opinion, in terms of security or the questions, the amount of time that it will take, and I think you'll get more of a real Palestinian experience with having your schedule extended, having your travel time extended, having so many just hoops you have to jump through to travel in and out of Amman. It makes it all feel knowing it is one thing. Physically going through all of it makes it feel more real in a way. So I would say that's part of what you get out of the Amman experience.
So would you share what Anne asked about? What?
Yeah, sure. So Anne asked what it was like having a gun pointed at us. So there was the evening that we were on our way back from Nablus to Ramallah is when we got stopped at the checkpoint for, I think it was 2 hours and 50 minutes. It felt like a lot longer than that, I'll say. But there was a small group of us that walked up to the checkpoint because the line was so long to see what was going on. And again, I use the air quotes, the security protocol, to see what was happening. And like I said earlier, there was none. We were just stopped. We heard from people in line on the walk up there that they had pulled some teenage boys out of the car, Palestinians out of the car, and were being arrested. By the time we got up there, we didn't see anything of that, but that doesn't mean that didn't happen before we got there. Because also then by the time we went back, got on the bus and actually rode the bus through the checkpoint, the soldiers that had been called on us and pointed guns at us weren't there anymore either. So again, it's pretend, it's security theater. But about that experience, I'm definitely still processing that, I think. But I expected, as Omar directed us, that they would have questions for us if we walked up there to the checkpoint, that they would want to know who we are and why we were there, what we were doing, probably yell at us and get our information and tell us to go back to the bus. They didn't do any of that. As we were watching them, you could see there were not a ton of them there at the checkpoint, which also is infuriating to know that only a small handful of literally teenagers with guns can stop hundreds and thousands of people from going about their lives. But yeah, so they called reinforcements, and another armed personnel carrier showed up with more heavily armed soldiers who got out and joined the others at the checkpoint. And it was kind of dark, it was evening, so it was hard for them to see us, and it was hard for us to see them. So I think that adds to the maybe tension of the situation, especially again thinking I work with teenagers. Thinking who those people were on the other side of the gun is terrifying and really heartbreaking too. But thinking about that those weapons that were being pointed at us on that occasion are pointed at Palestinians every day, of any age, of any health condition, of any gender. There's no difference. And it was knowing, after standing there for a while, I'll admit, I have on occasion put myself physically in a place of danger, knowing that my white privilege will protect me, and doing that in an act of solidarity to hopefully protect the others that I am with. And in that particular condition with that lighting, I think I realized after standing there for a while, it doesn't matter. And at this point in this conflict, in this genocide, it doesn't matter that this is all pretend now, and they are ready to shoot to kill at any point. We could tell, just to share with you a little bit, we know that the guns were being pointed directly at us because one of them had a red laser sight on it. So I was wearing a black jacket. I had intentionally kept my jacket open so they could see like white sweatshirts and maybe look a little more touristy or something. And could just see that come up my body and right to my friend Addie's face right behind her. So the lasers reflected off of her glasses and my clothes. And I was thinking too, I was there just in May on a trip, apartheid-free delegation. And we were getting daily news reports while we were there. And there was an Israeli soldier, young woman, I think 20 years old or so, 21 maybe, who committed suicide by checkpoint. She had been serving in the West Bank. And so who better to know what the conditions were at that, but she intentionally took her own life by dressing in black and walking up to a checkpoint and shouting Allah Akbar, and they killed her instantly. There was no question. There was no no interviews, no questions between them of who she was or what she was doing. And so that ran through my mind then too, that we know this could happen at any point to Palestinians, but they're really in a trigger happy place right now. And it doesn't seem to matter at all who's on the other side of that. I don't think it would have mattered if they'd known that we were Americans in that case. In years past, it has. This is part of our work with going on solidarity delegations to harvest olives or plant olive trees. Those things I think many of you have been a part of or know of over the years. That international presence makes a difference, because they don't want an international incident. They don't want their public reputation to be even more tarnished than it already is. But to involve especially Americans in that would be too much trouble for them. But they've also been told and shown over the last couple of years that they can intentionally execute an American journalist, and it doesn't matter. The U.S. isn't going to do anything. So I would say all of those things were running through my head at that point, that how far this situation has devolved from the international example that they're trying to portray, that again, any of this has any validity or it does anything for anyone's security. It just doesn't. It's all yeah, it feels almost like human life doesn't matter to Israel. And I question whether it really even matters. Their own the lives of their own Israeli citizens matters to them at this point. That it is a madness seems to just be running through the entire structure. And unfortunately, they have the arms and the military and the financing from our own government to harass, to execute whoever they so choose at any moment. So I'm still processing that, but those are some of the thoughts that were going through my head.
Thank you so much. I mean, for sharing. I know it takes a lot to speak about it, and I know it's not just. It's always tense in the occupied territories, but this time it was much more tense, and we all felt it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was a long day. It was night, and it's you can feel the tension with everyone. Even when we were walking towards the checkpoint, many of the cars were saying, "Just go back. Don't get in trouble, or be careful." But we have Nushin with us. Hi, Nushin.
Hello, everyone.
Nice scarf.
Ha! Yeah, I bought 4 of them on this trip. Of course, I came home and I got really sick, but I was good while I was there. So just real quick about the travel through Amman. When I accepted the invitation to come, and I accepted because my grandmother was a survivor of the Armenian genocide. And at the time, the Armenians were saying, "Where are the churches?" And when this call came to come be there in solidarity, I was like, of course I'm going. How can I not go after, what happened to my own family? But going through Amman, I mean, I decided I'm going to go on this trip, but I'm not going to step foot in Israel. So that's why I went through Amman, which actually that's the reason why I had to leave a day and a half early, because if I went through Tel Aviv on El Al, I would have been, I think it's like, a 12-hour nonstop flight to Newark. It took 44 hours from when I left the hotel in Ramallah to get home instead of a 12-hour flight. But East Jerusalem, I was thrilled to be in. And the one day that we drove into Tel Aviv and I kind of couldn't get out of that, which is another conversation, really. I stayed on the bus. I didn't want to step foot in Israel, as I said. So I was thrilled to be there with you, Omar, and I want to thank you for that enormous, huge effort you put into this trip and delegation. I mean, it was heroic what you did. And what I saw after 18 years of not being there was stunning, really. I mean, I felt that the settlements had encroached so much into Jerusalem that they were kind of on top of Jerusalem, like, like closing in on, not Jerusalem, sorry, closing in on Bethlehem. And what we saw in Silwan with the quote unquote City of David project, that they're taking people's houses and rebranding the area as City of David. I mean, there was so much. I'm still processing. I've already written 4 articles, that are going out in different places, but there's still so much in my head that I'm trying to process and download. One on our first full day, we went and spent an hour or more with the director of UNRWA in the UNRWA compound in East Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah. And, I mean, they're broke on a good day. And so what's happened to them after this allegation about some of their employees being involved in October 7th has just been part of the crushing reality of Gaza. And the director told us, when the funding of UNRWA was pulled by 16 countries or frozen, he said the first call he got was from the Israeli military saying, what does this mean? You're not going away, are you? Basically they need UNRWA there as much as the Palestinians need UNRWA. And it, to keep things stable. But he told us, we walked in to the compound, and in the middle of the compound is this kind of courtyard, and there's these 3 beautiful, new, shiny, gleaming, white Toyota Land Cruisers sitting there. They look new. But turns out they weren't new, and the Australian government had donated these cars to them. Turns out they're armored vehicles. They've been, they're like $200,000 each. But Australia has a policy of only using them for 5 years. And after that, they have to be scrapped and crushed. So UNRWA basically negotiated with Australia to take them as donations, because they need armored vehicles to get around. And when the funding freeze happened, Australia froze these cars. So the cars, looked like new, are sitting there, dormant, I guess you could call them, and they're not allowed to use them because the funds are frozen. So Australia would rather do that, freeze the donation, than let UNRWA use these cars. And at the height of irony, the person in charge of UNRWA in Gaza is an Australian national.
Mm.
So and the other thing that's big in my mind right now is what has happened to Israel itself. I mean, they are what I'm calling Fortress Israel. They are, they've built walls around themselves and are in a bubble that don't really see reality. And I thought, well, we've, of course, as the US, enabled that. And this is what impunity looks like. What we're seeing here, they can do whatever they want and nobody stops them.
But we were at the Armenian Quarter, and you being an Armenian, the guys there is so much hope, correct? There's so much hope within the Armenian Quarter.
Amongst the Armenians?
Yes. Didn't you find the energy? Didn't you find extremely interesting?
Well, I mean, it's incredible what the young Armenians have done in that parking lot that is, that is under a land grab, I guess you could call it. I don't know if everybody knows that story, but if you Google Armenian Quarter Cow's Garden, you can read all about it. But the young people have installed a tent and they're physically there every night. 4 or 5 of them spend the night there to keep the land of that's part of the Armenian church's property from being taken by an Israeli, a Jewish Australian developer. It's a crazy story, but yeah, the young people that are resisting are
You see, it's all
definitely
Australia's fault. Wherever we go, Australia was,
another. Yeah,
donating cars, asking to
yeah.
demolish the
Well,
cars.
as an American, I'm going to say no. It's really our fault, but
Yeah.
but yeah, those young people, those young Armenians, certainly provided um, a bright spot in the week I was there. Um, but it's just this. It's so ugly what they're doing. It's so ugly, and I have to say, seeing the Israeli flag was really triggering for me. It's kind of like seeing the Nazi flag for me, which is really a weird thing to say. And I mean, as an Armenian, the Turkish flag does that to me. When I went to Istanbul and I saw these Turkish flags everywhere, I was really triggered by it. But what healed me was hearing Armenian spoken on the streets of Istanbul. So that was like, okay, if they can be here and live here, I can manage this. But being in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, in the Muslim quarter or the Armenian quarter, and then seeing these Israeli flags, hanging there, which are, settlers who've come and taken things, property, it's just triggering for me, I guess is the best way I can put it.
Thank you very much, friends. I mean, we have always at the end of Kumi a time dedicated for activism and meetings. Lily, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Do you think we have time for breakout rooms, Omar, or should we just go over things together here?
Yeah, let's go over. Maybe no need for breakup rooms.
Okay. Yeah, once again, thank you to Marietta and Noshin for sharing with us. I think those of us in the call who are looking forward to maybe traveling to Palestine soon appreciate you sharing your experiences. We're at this time going to move on to the portion of our call that is our actions for the week. So in the Sabeel newsletter that was sent out yesterday, the actions that are listed are one worldwide action, which is a positive action this week, thanking Rabbis for Human Rights, who were our speaker on the Kumi session last week. In the newsletter, there are instructions for how you can contact, and thank you, Ryan, for sharing that in the chat now. The email that you can send to the Rabbis for Human Rights office is included in what Ryan's just shared in the chat. And we encourage you to write in your email if you attended last week's Kumi session, things you appreciated, things that you learned from them. If you go to the website that's included, you can look up their work and include things in your email that are specific to what they've been doing, especially since October 7th with protective presence and advocacy. That's our worldwide action. In addition to just continuing to share the global Gaza ceasefire pilgrimages that are happening during the season of Lent in many different areas and communities. And then we only have a US action this week. FOSNA has created yet another email template for continuing to contact and email representatives. And we encourage you to visit the FOSNA website to fill out it's a fast action survey or email, so it should be quite easy to do, specifically in response to the most recent US veto of the UN Security Council resolution. So it's sad that every week there are more things that we can include in our emails and in our activism, the ways that our countries are complicit, but we encourage you to not give up, to continue advocating, continue going to events and planning events in your own areas and homes and churches, and sending these emails. I'm seeing something in the chat about updated actions for Black pastors in the USA who came out for a ceasefire. We don't have an action for that at the minute, but if anyone has information to share about this, please share it in the chat and let us know. Yeah. So at this time, we can take a few moments to complete the actions. So at this time, I just want to thank everyone again for being present on our session tonight. And thank you again to the members of the Presbyterian delegation who are now fighting the fight back at home to continue their advocacy and activism, as are all of us in our own contexts. If you didn't get the chance to complete the actions during our time on the call, please feel free once you log off this call to continue work on that. And that's all from Sabeel and Kumi for tonight. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for your work.